Hello and welcome to a weekly Parshas Shir with commentary of the Alshich Kodesh, and the last couple of weeks, others as well. And this week's Alshich Shir, apart from looking at what the Alshich says, we'll be looking at Rashi, the Ramban, the Sfas Emes, and somebody called Simcha Zissel, to tell us the story of Kedoshim. Before we start the Shir, I should remind you, as I always do, that the Shir is available for sponsorship. And this week it's to sponsor, if that's the right word, it should be a schus for the refuah shalima of somebody called Chaim Eliezer ben Altabela, who is my wife's uncle and is not very well at the moment in Los Angeles. Reb Chaim Eliezer ben Altabela should have a refuah shalima. If you would like the share dedicated to somebody you love who's perhaps not well, or to celebrate a simcha, any other good Jewish reason, please just get in touch with me at YY@AskRabbiYY.com, YY@AskRabbiYY.com, and we go straight into Parshas Kedoshim. Parshas Kedoshim, I'm not this week, for those who are regulars, going to start with using my art scroll Chumash. We're going to use a standard Mikras Gedolos because I want to access the Ramban, as I mentioned to you before. We're only going to look at two psukim, then we're going to look at the Alshich, and then I'm going to look at the Sfas Emes. So here is what the Parshas starts off with: V'yedaber Hashem el Moshe lemora, and Hashem speaks to Moshe lemora to say, Daber el kol adas b'nei Yisrael, speak to the entire congregation of the Jewish people, v'amart aleim, and say to them, Kedoshim tiyu, you should be holy, ki kodesh ani Hashem lekechem, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. And that's all we're going to look at. Let's see what Rashi has to say about that. First of all, Daber el kol adas b'nei Yisrael, speak to the entire Jewish people, Malamed she nemra b'parshazu b'hakal. This tells you that the entire Jewish people were indeed gathered together to hear this particular parsha. They heard it firsthand, not passed on through the hierarchy, Moshe teaching it to Aaron, teaching to the Zakanim, etc., and down through, being repeated over and over and reaching the masses, if I can use that phrase, but rather they all stood there and heard this, a bit like getting the Torah at Mount Sinai when we heard the Ten Commandments. Then in a slightly different sense, they heard this too. And why was it so important for them to hear this? So Rashi gives an answer which the Alshich is going to diverge from, and the next Rashi is going to give an answer to a different question, or rather to the same question but from a different aspect, which the Ramban is going to want to disagree with and take in a different direction. Let's see what the first Rashi continues to say. So maybe I'll read it from the top again. Malamet shenemra parshazu b'kahal, that the entire Jewish people heard this, or said over perhaps to the whole Jewish people, because the Roy of Gufi Torah, the majority of the mitzvahs of the Torah, the concepts of the Torah, the commandments of the Torah, you can find in this parsha. The parsha of Kedoshim is full of mitzvahs. So that's why they all had to hear it, because this is a big moment to have so many mitzvahs at one time. That's what the Rashi says. I'm not going to show you the Alshich just yet, because I want to read the next Rashi. The next Rashi says, Kedoshim tiyu, you will be holy. And why should you be holy? Because God says, because I am holy. I can't resist telling you, the Alshich is going to say that is totally upside down. If Hashem is holy and Hashem is Hashem, then by definition you can't be holy. You can't be like Hashem. Like a human being can't, well, you could be like Hashem, but you can't be on the same level of Hashem. So let's get to that in due course, but let's finish that second Rashi. Kedoshim tiyu. What does that mean? You should be holy. An interesting concept. Holiness, it actually, frankly, is a bit of an arcane and an archaic word. Arcane means very few people, of course, understand what's going on. Archaic means a very old-fashioned word. It really is a very old-fashioned word, particularly in today's world. To be holy, I mean, you almost can hear little boys sniggering. Let me read to you something from my translation of Shar B'tochen and the Chomas Labobas, which is called Refuah Salev. I'm just going to ready to reprint it, which will be its third reprint because it keeps selling out. And please, please, please don't buy it from the person, whoever he is, on Amazon for $1,200. I still have just a few left. I'll give it to you for the price of $25, which is the proper price. Anyway, here is what I wrote in the introduction to chapter 4 of Shara B'Tochen, of the Chavos Levavos. I have a quote from Shlomo Wolbe. Rav Shlomo Wolbe points to the fact that there's a famous story about the Reb Simcha Zissel. Reb Simcha Zissel, the founder of the Yeshiva of Kelm. And he says the following thing. Oh, I should say that Reb Simcha Zissel's great Talmud was Reb Yerucham Levovitz, the Mashgiach of Mir, and he had many great Talmudim, but Reb Shlomo Wolbe was one of Reb Yerucham's greatest Talmudim. And the Manchester Rosh Hashiva, who's going to feature very much in this share, was also Talmud of Reb Yerucham. My Rosh Hashiva, Rebbe Gurovitz, was also Talmud of Reb Yerucham. So it's Rebbe Talmud, Rebbe Talmud. So Rosh Shlomo Wolbe points out in Ali Shar, it's volume 2 and page 79, and says the following thing. I think this is beautiful. During the lifetime of Reb Simcha Zissel, the founder of the Yeshivas Kelm, Darwin promulgated his theory of evolution. Reb Simcha Zissel said, Darwin claims that men are descended from monkeys. That is, in fact, a perfectly reasonable conclusion for Darwin to have reached. The reason for this is that Darwin never actually saw a man. I, on the other hand, observed Reb Yisrael Salanter, and I know that man did not descend from an ape. This is an extremely profound idea. I mean, sadly, and in today's world, when I'm making this share, there's a horrible war raging, as everybody knows, between Russia and the Ukraine, or perhaps by extension, the West, and the West in general. When everybody knows that war brings out the best sometimes in people, and certainly the worst. And when it comes to war, people behave like animals. So to see human beings whose behavior is animalistic, and see that as a general condition, at least in comparison to something like Rebbe Strauss-Salanta, could easily lead people to say, well, these are just more refined animalistic behavior patterns. But if you actually see a Rebbe Strauss-Salanta, said Reb Simcha Zissel, I can tell you that was a totally different sort of human being who couldn't possibly have descended from apes. I personally saw the Manchester Rosh Hashiva, Reb Siegel, and Reb Siegel was a truly holy person. And when you see someone like that, you just know that there's no such thing as arcane and archaic holiness. There is up-to-date holiness. It's a reality. I've seen it many, many times. I saw him and many others like him. But it's certainly a concept which is a bit hard to put your finger on. What does it mean? And that's really what Rashi says. The Torah tells us to be holy, but what definition? How would you describe holiness? Is it locking yourself off from the rest of the world and just talking to God all the time, basically becoming a hermit? What is the description of holiness? Or is it to deal with people and help people who are sick and help people who are poor? What is the description of holiness? So Rashi gives one. Kedoshim Tiyu, and Rashi quotes a medrash which says, Kedoshim Tiyu, have a Perushim min harayas. Now, we were talking about in the world out there that the two definitions I gave you would fit perfectly with the world's concept of a holy individual, cut off from the material, from the physical world, effectively, or busy in the physical world, but doing acts of kindness. But Rashi says, quoting primary Jewish sources, no, Perushim min arayas umin havira. Separate yourself from arayas, from immorality, from sexual immorality, a very hard thing to do in today's world. Cut yourself off from that, and from avera, and from doing negative things. Shekol mokum sha'ata moitza geder erva. Because if you come across a society which establishes boundaries to separate people from erva, from sexual immorality, societies that impose those sort of rules to try and stop debauchery becoming the norm, that's automatically where you will find holiness. Holiness, therefore, is what fills the vacuum which is created by people who ban a sexually licentious culture. So says Rashi. You find Kedusha, etc. And he brings a verse, but we don't need to go into that. But that's Rashi's argument. The Ramban disagrees. The Ramban sources the Rashi 2 of the Medrash, which I mentioned before, and says Rashi's not quoting it correctly. It doesn't say, what does it mean to be holy? Separate yourself from, and then gives 2 examples, immorality or separate yourself from Avera. Rather, it says separate yourself and doesn't specify what. But the Ramban does. Separate yourself? What that means, and here the Ramban, I think, probably is the most quoted, well-known commentary of the Ramban and the whole of the Chumash, when the Ramban famously says that it's possible for a person to keep the letter of the law. That means you do all that the Torah requires of you, and still be a naval b'reshut Torah, and still be a base human being, a low life, with the license of the Torah itself. I'm keeping the laws. And he gives various examples. A person could insist that his wines and his meat have the very best hechsher, and perhaps 2 hechsherim, maybe 3 hechsherim. He drinks and eats all day long, and of course it's super ultra kosher. Has he in any way violated the what the Torah wants? No, he's checked all the boxes except the critical one. The mitzvahs are not an end in themselves. The mitzvahs are the vehicles, the steps to get you to what the ambition of the mitzvah is, to be holy. And a person who spends his whole life an epicure, stuffing his face and eating even the most wonderful foods prepared by the most kosher chef, you're violating the purpose of the mitzvah to become a kodesh. A person could have several wives and spend his whole time engaged in licensed Torah, licensed sexual relationships with his wife. Perfectly acceptable. He's married, it's allowed. But in so doing, he's become a base human being with the license of the Torah. You've got to know what the Torah wants to achieve from you. And being a kodesh means that even that which we're allowed to do in every aspect of life, should not be done in excess. Too much of anything is disastrous. Even too much of good things, of kosher things, of permitted things can also be disastrous as well. That's the Ramban. So the Rashi and the Ramban, 2 very, very famous statements or explanations about what Kedoshim means. Then we can close that and let's turn to the Alshich. And we've got 4 questions to examine from the Alshich in this week's Parsha. So again, Bidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, and Hashem speaks to Moshe to say, Daber el kol adas Israel, speak to the whole of the Jewish people. And question number 1 says the Alshich, and as I told you, he's going to disagree with Rashi. If you remember, Rashi said that there's so many mitzvahs contained in this Parsha and the Sedra that the whole Jewish people had to be there to hear them at first hand. And the Alshich is not satisfied, or at least he doesn't think that's sufficient. There's more that we need to address to really understand what's going on here. I'll read to you his question. Why didn't we need to assemble the entire Jewish people in this parsha? Zulus Tam Rabbi Sinzal, apart from what the Medrash says, I mean, he's not disagreeing with what the Medrash says because there are so many mitzvahs, they had to hear that. But surely there's more going on. Leaving that explanation, Rashi's explanation aside, there has to be more to it. So that's question number 1. Why the entire Jewish people were gathered for this moment at this parsha. And then number 2, Omro va'amarta alim. So gather the entire Jewish people, and say to them. So what's this va'amarta alim? And then it says va'amarta alim kedoshim tiyu. It should say Daber Moshe lemor. Daber kol bnei Israel. Kedoshim tiyu. It says Daber. What did he say? Kedoshim tiyu. What's this va'amarta alim? And va'amarta alim. What's this extra word va'amarta alim? What's va'amarta alim? Shehumeus, we don't need that at all. If you've got the pasuk there in front of you, I'll read that slowly again. It should just say, what does it say? Daber kol adas bnei Israel. Speak to the entire congregation of Jewish people. Va'amarta alim and say, it should just say, Daber kol adas bnei Israel. Speak to the whole Jewish people. Kedoshim tiyu. So what's this va'amarta alim? This is the Alshich. You will know, no word, no letter, even the littlest letter, a yud, is in the Torah by accident. It's there to teach us something. You got 2 words which seem to add nothing, but in actual fact, we'll see they add quite a lot. 3, Omriki Kodesh, you should be holy because I am holy. And listen to the Alshich. That's strange. Omriki Kodesh, Shehu Nesinas Tam Hafechi. you're giving a reason which is the opposite. Because God's holy, only if that's a definition of God, then it can't possibly be a definition of a human being. If what God is something called Kodosh, then it's unique to God, because that's God and nothing's like God. So therefore, how can it be that we've got to be something like God? Doesn't quite make sense. And 4, Kasher Omer, Ish, oh no, so that's all. It's only 3 questions. So then he's going to go on to ask why it says, it goes on in the next pasuk, which we didn't look at, to tell you about the mitzvah of kibbud the aim of honoring your parents. But that'll be for a different time and a different shir. So that's the question, just 3 questions. So let's reflect on them again. So why does the entire Jewish people have to be here for this particular parsha as opposed to any other? Apart from the reason, because there's lots of mitzvahs. I suppose you could argue that other parshas got lots of mitzvahs. And that question number 2, it says, Amarta Alehem, extra words. And number 3, that you've got to do all this, you've got to be holy, because I'm holy would be a reason that doesn't make sense. Because if God's holy, then we can't be like God. That's what it has to say. Now, let me read to you what the Alshich says here, and I think it's fabulous. But those who have been learning the Alshich for the last 2 years will already have understood that, I think. But everything the Alshich says is fabulous. Anyway, Hine, Lavola Inu. To understand really, to answer the questions, and incidentally, we only looked at 3, but here he asks, in fact, I think with 10. Hine, Lavola Inu, to understand this, Nosim Lev, Al Inin HaKedusha HaZayis Mahi. To consider, what is this idea of Kedusha? Now, again, this is the question that we already saw that Rashi and the Ramban debated, or rather gave varying explanations of, but it's certainly the question is, what does holy mean? So he says the following thing. If, like Rashi says, it's to keep away from immorality, who shava altaisa v'lo yitzadik boy loshen tiyu, then it's something you shouldn't do. But the word Kedoshim tiyu means something you should do. So that doesn't quite fit. If it's keeping away, if it's a negative, keep away from it, the word suggests a positive, do something. This is the Alshich. This is what I think. A human being is made up of 2 opposing dynamics, 2 opposing elements. One is the physical, the body, the guf. The second one is the spiritual. And he says it's the purpose of a Jew to take the guf, which is the physical, and transform it into something which matches the spiritual. And the spiritual is going to do that. It's going to take it. And let me read a little bit more to you. A person, every human being is made up of 2 opposite dynamics. We've called on the Arba Olamas, and then he goes into Kabbalistic thought, which I only allude to here. Apparently in Kabbalistic thought, there are 4 worlds. Some people see different, more than 4 dimensions. And therefore, the elements of a human being, Ruach, Neshama, Nefesh, and Guf, Guf is the physical, and 3 elements of the spiritual, come from these 4 dimensions of creation. And only a human being is made up of all 4. Therefore, when a Jew gets it right, and a Jew unites all the elements of creation, all the dimensions of the creation, all the worlds of creation, which is quite a big thing to think about. So he says, therefore he says, well, I think I lost it in here. It's made of the 4 elements of creation. Before Parshas Bereshit, I've already explained in Parshas Bereshit. To whom yada Adam, and it's therefore in the hand of a human being through his bechira, or her bechira for their choice. A person can either take the spiritual and drag it after be led by the physical and corrupt it accordingly, or take the physical, let that be led by the spiritual and purify it as a consequence. Because if a person focuses on the spiritual, the Torah and the mitzvahs, and rejects all the material hedonism of this world, as the great rabbis of the earlier generations, of the earliest generations did, then the physical then becomes holy, is sanctified. Okay, now it's a nevuah shor alim, and that's why they were able to achieve nevuah. That's why God would be able to speak to them, because their physical body, as it were, had stopped being physical of this world, and there was a transformation. In fact, we have a tradition that people at that spiritual level, their bodies did not and do not rot in the ground. An indicator of the level, the transformation of the physical. Well, Inyan Maimar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, and that's why Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, in the famous Brisa, which the famous Sefer Mesilas Yesharim is based on, says, and it's Brisa in the Gemara by Zora, and Avkaf on the base, Zahiris, maybe the days Jesus, etc. Jesus brings you to Zahiris. There are various levels that a person can go to eventually come to Ruach HaKodesh. There are certain transformations that a person can achieve by working away with Torah and mitzvahs till the physical is diminished to such an extent that God can speak directly. The physical body is no longer a barrier, stopping access from the upper worlds reaching the soul, which actually came from the upper worlds, which is, as it were, subsumed by the body because the body has now been fixed by the mitzvahs that a person did. Ad bo b'tay b'chirosa b'medregas al medrega acha skiach ruach hakodesh ad geder nevuah. Because the choices a person makes in growing spiritually has brought him to the point where the body is purified and no longer is a barrier to prophecy. They purified their body. And then he gives more examples of people who for whom this occurred, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who wrote the Zohar, etc., that they purified themselves to be able to achieve such a thing. Now, so he seems to be arguing, let's start off by making it quite clear there were holy people, just like I cited the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva I knew. The Alshich is saying at the time of the Talmud, at the time of the Mishnah, was certainly people like that. And how were they able to prophecy? Because they had purified their body by an attachment to Torah and mitzvahs, and the physical falls away or becomes such a weak barrier that connection with heaven is achieved. So he says, therefore, with all that in mind, don't think that just stopped at the time of the Talmud. No. So listen to this. Manuvua al bir ksuvim. Oh, and incidentally, I mentioned before Reb Simcha Zissel. Reb Simcha Zissel, who Reb Shlomo Wolbe said that Darwin could only come to his conclusion because he never met Reb Shlomo Salanta's Rebbe, Reb Simcha Zissel. But Reb Simcha Zissel himself said that the Kedusha of his Rebbe, Reb Shlomo Salanta, well, somebody asked him, did he have Ruach HaKodesh? And he smiled and he said, did he have Ruach HaKodesh? Well, that's a process. The process of Reb Pinchas ben Yair that we talked about, that brings you to Zrizas and Zahiris, etc. A whole book on the subject by Mesilas Yesharim. Whether you get Ruach HaKodesh at the end of it, that's up to the Almighty. Your job is to make yourself worthy that if he wanted to speak to you, he could. Whether Reb Yisrael Salant had Ruach HaKodesh, said Reb Simcha Zissel, I'm not going to answer, and I'm not sure if he says he meant he didn't know, but I'm not going to answer. But I can certainly attest to the fact that he went through the stages that could allow him to have Ruach HaKodesh. He diminished the physical to such an extent that this could occur. So let's now answer the questions that we posed at the beginning, in the three questions. Navo el bir haksuvim. Let's return to looking at the analysis of the psukim that we set up with our three questions. Who? Kiliyosa is barak bo lahaza es adam al chasidus a kedusha lekadas ruach shabbat the Thomas Bavari's barak. Since here that the Torah seems to be saying that a person should be purifying their body to such an extent where there is a certain parallel between a human being who is a Kodesh and Hashem himself. You should know there are some people who turn around and say that process is only for the Reb Simcha Zissels, for the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva, the one or two in a generation, but not for everybody else. Yes, there are outstanding, there's a genius, I can't remember what the level of genius is. I seem to remember some people say it's more than 10,000 1 in 10,000 is a genius at mathematics. 1 in 10,000 is a genius at some other people say 100,000. Well, in each generation, there's 1 or 2 or 10, whatever it is, tzaddikim, but that's it. That's not it. So listen to what he says. Rabhini, yesh b'nei Adam. So this is what they say. These people say there's some people, ibnei ish toim mederach, and make a mistake, mitoim mederach hasekel, who abandon a logical perspective by saying gelokal adam roilaka. It's only a few in a generation. Not everybody is roy. Not everybody is worthy to become a tzaddik. But zechel is there. Ki imachad bedora betrei bedora. That's 1 in the generation or 2 in the generation. Is rashul al yidei kain lamalam is mesulam hashlemes b'torah misas asana b'chasidas, and therefore they discourage people from trying to get up that ladder and go through the process of Repinkas ben Yoer that's contained in the book the Silsha Sharim. It's simply not true. Ki im she'en ish b'Yisrael shelo yasek im yetzel alas b'torah b'kishma ma'isa b'izmoidis b'chasidas ad kodesh yomer loy. There is no such thing as a Jew in any generation who, if he chooses, im yetze, if he wants to achieve kedusha, to go through this process of disconnect from the material and focusing and connection to the spiritual, who cannot achieve this process. That's a constant for every Jew. And then he says, that's why Al-Kain Lahor said to make that point. Sieving his Baruch Hashem said, Omer Daber. Now back to our apostle. Daber El Kol Das B'nai Yisrael. Speak to all the Jews. Why were they all gathered there? Not only because there's lots of mitzvahs, but to tell them, all of you, Kedoshim to you, you can be holy. And the people listening to this shir or watching this shir, you can be holy. I'm going to tell you how we do that in a minute. That takes me to the last sentence. But let me read a little more to you of the Alshich. Daber kol that's Yisrael. Kedoshim to you. Ki kahil es kulam. By gathering them all together, was in order that there's nobody left out. No, don't just say you'll bring half of them. There's no fraction here. Maybe half could become Kedoshim, 3/4, and then leave a quarter behind. All. You're only here because you've become a Kodesh. Now, of course, there are things like what about Down syndrome children and all that sort of stuff. I know about that. But as a general, a Jew is here because the purpose of a Jew is indeed to achieve Kedusha. This arcane and archaic concept. Don't think that the Hashem gathered them there so that the 1 or 2 in the generations could hear him saying Kedoshim to you. Not at all. You will say to them, all of them, Kedoshim. And the Alshich goes on to say something else. It says that this idea of being Kedoshim, the Malachim are called Kedoshim. You can find it in Daniel, Dalad Yud Dalad, the Sefer Daniel, but it says, Ubamemar Kadishin Shelat. That the angels of God are called Kadishim, holy ones. It's in Aramaic, it's Kedoshim. But it says the Alshich, a brilliant thing, because then you say, well, how can I be as holy as an angel? Ha! Well, he doesn't say ha, but I'm saying ha. No, he says, you missed the point. A Jew can be holier than an angel. And when he says that an angel is called holy, it simply means he doesn't have a physical form. And therefore, obviously, there's only spiritual. But an angel is just an algorithm. An angel is just, it's got to do what it's got to do, what it's told to do. But a human being has got bechira. And true Kedusha is when you fight against that nature, that body, that physical body that wants to do physical stuff and turn it into something which is holy. Exactly as the Ramban said, and the Rashi too. Rashi said, keep away from sexual morality. That will do it. Keep away from Avera. That will do it. The Ramban takes it a stage further. No, the things you are allowed to do, minimize them as well. That will do it. But everybody agrees that it's within the grasp of any human being, any Jewish human being, to achieve holiness. It's not an arcane or archaic idea. It's not an ancient idea. It's a contemporary idea. It's not arcane. It's clear. There are people who became holy. How do you do that? So that's what I wanted to take to the Sfas Emes. And I think the idea of being in a group, the old Jewish people hearing that, the Sfas Emes says that's really the hint of that gathering, and that national gathering is telling you how you do this. Let me read to you a little bit of the Sfas Emes. This is the first mimer, first essay of the Sfas Emes in this week's Parsha. Kedoshim to you. And the Medrash says, and the Zohar says, Kihu haftacha kigam ich yochel bos v'dam. This is a promise. Gamkin, even though ki ich yochel bos v'dam, how could it possibly be that for a human being is like Kedusha, the Kedusha of Hashem is Barach, to achieve Kedusha like the Kedusha of Hashem is Barach? The Pasuk says why? Because I'm holy. Because I'm holy, you can be holy. Because I will make you holy. Make the effort, try to achieve this, and I'll do this for you. As the Gemara famously says, just make a little opening in your heart for me, just to push that door open a little, and I'll throw the door open wide. Because when I took Klal Yisrael out from Mitzrayim, from their slavery, from their avdus, from their servitude, subservience to what a king, you became subservient to me. There are benefits in being close to me. I can tell you how to become Kodesh, how to become holy. How do you become holy? It's part of this gathering together. So listen to this. How do you become holy? Through me. Because I am holy. Al yadeh, through me, I'm telling you that you can become holy even in this physical world in which you exist, surrounded by materialism, surrounded by sexual immorality, surrounded by hedonism, and all the rest of the things. It's possible to overcome all that and still minimize the physical and maximize the spiritual. And then he says the following thing. And that's why it says, I'll gather them all together. The Ikar Kedusha al Yidesha Machnis Odom Atzum B'Klal Yisrael. The Ikar way that a person is able to achieve Kedusha is by attaching himself or herself to the Klal, to the Kehila, to the entirety of the Jewish people. Kiba Kedusha Shorish B'Klal Yisrael. Because in the entirety of the Jewish people, that's where you will find Kedusha in this world. Because the Jewish people together draw maximum Kedusha from Hashem Yisborach, and that inspires you in a more pragmatic way, or to put it more pragmatically, if you're attached to the Jewish people, you will find inspiration amongst other Jews that will take you and elevate you and allow you to grow to places you simply couldn't have believed that you could have achieved. I saw that when I saw the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva. It's not arcane, it's not archaic. I saw it in my lifetime, not too long ago, a truly holy man. I can attest to his holiness the same way as Rav Simcha Zissel could attest to the holiness of Rav Shrat Salanta. I saw my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Leib Gurovitz, my other Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Leib Lapian. I saw my Rov, the Gates of Rov, Rabbi Rakov. I saw, if I'm going to start listening, I saw so many holy men. I just didn't see them. I interacted with them. I interacted with the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Leib Gurovitz, Reb Leib Lapian, the Gates of Rov, Reb Alta Halpin, so many. It has an effect on you. It had an effect on me. It's not an archaic or an arcane concept. It's not old-fashioned or mysterious, enigmatic, only open to a few. The word arcane means only known to a few. The Alshich points out it can be known to all, but how you access that is through attachment to the Jewish people, because as soon as you start to rub shoulders with Jews who are Torah Jews, you get access to greatness and holiness, the like of which you've never seen before, and you discover a new type of human being. And that's quite a message to get out of this. Gather together, right, for this to be told, Kodesh, you can be holy. That's just in the first two psukim. And then all the mitzvahs that come after that, yes. But the big message right at the beginning is you, all of you, every one of us can be Kodesh, and we do it by connecting ourselves to the Jewish people, which maximizes our connection to Hashem. Enjoy that, and I look forward to seeing you next Thursday and Friday, depending which time of the world you see this share. A very good Shabbos.